Rome, 855. The Pope is being carried through the city, full procession, crowds, incense, banners, the whole production. And halfway down the street, the Pope stops, because the Pope is going into labor. That story was not a rumor someone passed around a tavern. For 300 years, it sat in the reference books that Europe used to look up who had been Pope. Then it didn't. Something happened in between, and that something is stranger than the story itself. Her name was Joan, born in a German city to English parents, and clever, far too clever for the options available to a woman in the 9th century. So she stopped being one, cut her hair, put on men's clothes, and went to study. She was very good at it. She out-argued everyone in the room. Then she out-argued everyone in the next room, and eventually she ran out of rooms and ended up in Rome. Nobody there knew. What they saw was a brilliant young scholar who could hold his own against any churchman alive. So he rose, and he kept rising, and when the Pope died, the men who chose the next one chose him. Joan was Pope for 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. Then she got pregnant. The child came during a procession, in the street, in front of everybody. What happened next, though, depends on who's telling it. Some say she died there, some say she was quietly taken away and never spoken of again. And for centuries afterwards, papal processions went the long way round to avoid that street. Nobody had to explain why. Everybody already knew. Here's the part that's hard to wave away. A Dominican chronicler sat down in the 1260s and wrote her into the list, between 2 real popes, in order, with her reign timed to the day. And his book did not stay in her drawer. 400 copies of it still survive. It was translated across Europe. If you wanted to know who had been Pope, that was the book you opened, and Joan was in it. There's a cathedral in Siena that put busts of every Pope along the wall. She got one, carved in stone, with a label. John VIII, woman, from England. And in 1415, a preacher on trial for heresy stood in front of a council of the entire church and used her in his defense. A room holding the most senior churchman in Europe. They took his argument apart. They burned him at the stake. Nobody mentioned that the female pope hadn't existed. But the strangest evidence isn't written down at all. It's furniture. 2 ancient stone thrones, deep red, with a large keyhole-shaped hole cut through the seat, used when a new pope was installed. And the explanation went like this. After Joan, the church was never getting caught out twice, so each new pope sat on the chair, a deacon knelt down, reached underneath, and checked. Then he announced the result out loud to the room. They had a phrase for it. He has 2, and they hang well. So, 3 centuries in Europe's standard reference book, a bust in a cathedral, a council that let it stand, and a piece of furniture with an inspection procedure and a catchphrase. Except, nobody alive at the time even mentions her. Not one person. The 9th century is not a quiet century. These people wrote constantly, mostly to complain about each other. The Pope giving birth in the street would have been the story of the age. There's nothing. For 400 years, nothing. So she didn't exist. Which leaves a much better question. How does a woman who was never born and never elected end up in the reference books of an entire continent with a bust, a ceremony, and a church that never once said no? Somebody wrote her down, nobody checked, everybody copied. It starts with a friar in France in the 1250s. He writes the story down, then he adds a note in the margin, which translates roughly as, "Check this." Nobody checked it. The next man copies the story. He does not copy the note. Neither does the one after him, and neither does anybody else. For 400 years. The doubt gets edited out in a single generation, and what's left behind is a fact. Then it lands in the chronicle, and the chronicle goes everywhere. After that, she isn't a claim anymore, she's background. Sculptors carve her because she's in the book. Preachers cite her for the same reason. And when somebody finds 2 old chairs in the Lateran with holes in them and can't work out what they were for, the story helpfully supplies an answer. The chairs are centuries older than Joan. The inspection was invented to explain the furniture. Then the Reformation arrives, and Joan stops being a curiosity and becomes ammunition. Protestant writers spend a century swinging her in Rome. Luther used her. Calvin used her. She was the best story they had, which is why it's funny who killed her. In the 1640s, a Protestant scholar sits down to make the case properly. to finally nail it down, and it comes apart in his hands. The dates don't work. One pope died in July of 855. The next was consecrated in September. That's 10 weeks. You cannot fit 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days into just 10 weeks. Then there's the man running the church in the East, who at that exact moment was locked in a vicious argument with Rome and would have used absolutely anything. If the Pope had given birth in the street, he'd have written about it at length, possibly in verse. He'd never heard of her. And when the scholar worked out where the story probably started, it wasn't a woman at all. It was a joke about a man. A pope who took the throne barely out of his teens, put there by his mother, one of a handful of Roman women who genuinely did decide who got the job. Everyone knew it. Nobody could say it out loud. Give that a century of retelling, and women choosing the pope becomes a woman being one. So he published, Protestant, handing Rome the receipts, and the one story his entire side had been enjoying for 100 years. Nobody thanked him. There was never a female pope, but for 300 years there was one in the book everybody trusted. She wasn't real. She was just believed. And believed was enough to get her a place in the records, a bust in a cathedral, and a chair with a hole in it.